There is a version of you that moves through the world smoothly. It knows how to respond, knows what tone to use, knows when to speak and when to stay quiet. It doesn't panic, doesn't ask for too much, doesn't cause problems. It functions, and most days, it feels like you. But there is also a faint sense, barely noticeable unless things slow down, that this version of you is always slightly ahead of itself, always watching, always adjusting, as if living has become a careful performance rather than something that happens naturally. Not because you're dishonest, not because you're pretending, but because this is how you learned to stay intact. There is a quiet familiarity to this, a sense of being competent but not entirely present, of being capable but somehow untouched by your own life. You may not think about it often, you may not have words for it. It just feels like something you carry, something that never quite sets down. This personality didn't appear out of nowhere. It wasn't chosen or planned. It was assembled slowly, piece by piece, in moments where being fully open didn't feel safe. It formed when awareness mattered more than expression, when reading the room was more important than being seen, when staying steady mattered more than being real. It learned how to listen carefully, how to anticipate shifts, how to stay composed even when something inside tightened. Not because you were weak, but because you were paying attention. You noticed what worked and what didn't. You noticed when softness caused complications, when honesty created distance, when having needs made things harder. So you adapted, not dramatically, not consciously, just quietly. You became reliable, or agreeable, or emotionally self-contained. You became someone who could manage themselves, someone who wouldn't add weight to the room, someone who wouldn't tip the balance. And in that way, this personality succeeded. It kept things calm, kept things moving, kept you from falling apart when falling apart wasn't an option. It helped you survive environments where unpredictability lived just under the surface. It helped you stay upright. There is no failure in that, only intelligence. But survival has a way of becoming habitual. What once responded to danger can linger long after danger has passed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the personality that protected you becomes the only way you know how to exist. You stop noticing how much effort it takes. You stop noticing how often you check yourself before you speak, how often you soften reactions before they reach the surface, how often you hold back emotions until they lose their shape. Not because you don't feel, but because feeling fully would interrupt the rhythm you learned to maintain. There is a quiet vigilance underneath it all, a constant low-level readiness, a sense of needing to be on, even in safe moments, even alone, especially alone. Because the habit isn't about other people anymore. It's internal, a self-monitoring that never fully shuts off. Over time, this creates a very specific kind of tiredness, not the kind that sleep fixes, not the kind that rest reaches. It's the tiredness of being slightly braced all the time, of holding yourself together without realizing your muscles are clenched, of living as if something might go wrong even when nothing is happening. You may notice it in small ways, a difficulty relaxing into joy, a hesitation before expressing excitement, a strange numbness during moments that are supposed to feel meaningful. You show up, you participate, you function well enough, but part of you stays behind the glass, watching, managing, containing. Life touches you, but lightly, as if you've learned to let it pass through without leaving a mark. This isn't emptiness, it's protection. But protection comes with a cost, not an obvious one, not something dramatic, just a slow thinning of sensation, a narrowing of emotional range, a sense that you're always slightly removed from your own experiences. You may feel grounded but not quite alive, stable but distant, capable but untouched, because this way of being has kept you safe for so long. Questioning it can feel disloyal, as if noticing the cost somehow diminishes the reason it existed. But understanding doesn't erase gratitude, it simply adds context. This personality wasn't built to explore, or to risk, or to feel deeply without consequence. It was built to endure, to remain intact when circumstances demanded steadiness, to protect the softer parts that didn't have space to exist openly. And it did that well, very well, so well that you may not remember what it feels like to exist without calculating the emotional weather first, to respond without scanning for impact, to feel without filtering. That forgetting isn't a failure. It's what happens when adaptation becomes identity, when survival strategies harden into character traits, when caution becomes personality. You didn't choose this consciously. You grew into it, and growth under pressure doesn't ask for permission. There is often a subtle grief here, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet sense that something essential has been postponed, a life lived carefully rather than fully, a version of you that learned how to manage life but not how to be inside it. This grief doesn't always announce itself as sadness. Sometimes it shows up as boredom, or restlessness, or a vague sense of disconnection. Sometimes it appears as productivity without satisfaction, or relationships that feel stable but distant, or an inability to name what you want, because wanting requires contact with yourself, and contact hasn't always felt safe. So you learn to exist at a measured distance from your own inner life, close enough to function, far enough to stay protected. There is no blame in this, only a quiet acknowledgement that what saved you then may not be what nourishes you now. And even that realization doesn't require action. It doesn't demand change. It simply asks to be seen. When you look at this personality with context, something shifts, not outwardly, but internally. It stops feeling like a flaw and starts to feel like evidence. Evidence of awareness, of sensitivity, of intelligence, of a nervous system that learned quickly, of a mind that noticed patterns and responded accordingly. You didn't become this way because you were broken. You became this way because you were paying attention, because you sensed what was required, because you adapted to survive environments that didn't always meet you with softness. That matters, and it deserves recognition. There is a tenderness in realizing that the parts of you that feel distant were once protectors, that the emotional walls weren't built to keep life out, but to keep you safe inside. That distance wasn't indifference, it was care. You may notice moments where this personality softens on its own, not because you tried, but because safety arrived quietly. A moment of unguarded laughter, a sense of being understood without explanation, a rare feeling of ease in your own presence. These moments don't need to be held onto or chased. They simply exist as reminders that underneath the structure, something alive is still there, waiting patiently, not demanding attention, not asking to be fixed, just present. And even if that aliveness feels faint right now, that doesn't mean it's gone. It means it learned how to stay quiet, just like everything else did. There is no urgency here, and no requirement to undo what took years to build, no pressure to become someone else. This isn't about transformation. It's about recognition, about seeing yourself clearly, without judgment, about allowing the personality you built to be understood for what it was and what it isn't. It isn't the whole of you. It's a layer, a response, a carefully crafted way of being that kept you steady when steadiness was necessary. And layers can exist without being torn away. They can be acknowledged without being removed, honored without being obeyed forever. Even that understanding can come later. For now, it's enough to notice, enough to let the quiet truth of it land gently, enough to rest in the awareness that nothing about you was accidental and nothing about you was wrong. You survived in the way that made sense at the time. And the fact that you're listening now suggests that some part of you already knows this, already understands, already holds compassion for the version of you that did what it had to do. You don't need to go anywhere from here. You don't need to become anything new. You don't need to dismantle the self that carried you through. You can simply let this awareness settle, like setting down a heavy coat for a moment, not to discard it, just to feel the difference, to feel your shoulders without weight, to notice your breath without monitoring it, to exist briefly without needing to manage yourself. And if that moment passes quickly, that's okay. Nothing is lost. The recognition remains quiet, grounded, complete. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not broken. You adapted. And now, gently, you are noticing. That is enough.